And we're live. Welcome back, everyone. Attorney Craig Steger here, practicing in Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa. Today, I wanted to talk about ATVs and UTVs and how and why they continue to hurt and sometimes kill people. So, this morning, I was scrolling through the local news and I read about, unfortunately, another tragic story of a child, I believe 10 years old, in our area that was killed in a UTV accident, and there aren't a ton of details in the story other than it sounds like the child and a passenger were on the UTV and went around a corner too sharp, and the UTV flipped over, and the child that was driving was killed. And and I'm not sure the make or model. It said UTV, which in my mind generally means like a side by side type of thing, something different than, let's say, a traditional four wheeler. I grew up on three wheelers, and then four wheelers came out that I think we usually call ATVs, and then UTVs typically means something more like a Ranger or a side by side type thing that usually has multiple seats, as well as, and probably most significantly, a cab or rollover protection unit, some sort of a roll cage. They tend to be wider, so have a much larger footprint, heavier, but ought to be more stable than, let's say, four wheeler. Because a lot of times, what would happen, even with the four wheelers, now with three wheelers, people were always rolling over because you would turn too sharp, and the vehicle would go over, and people were uh, routinely injured or killed when I was growing up in the 80s and 90s on ATV three wheeler accidents, and then they came out with four wheelers, which are much more stable, but still prone to rolling over, especially if you hit and don't see a hole or rock or some other bump in the trail can throw you, and people would get thrown from these things. And as the four wheelers got larger, what would happen is the four wheeler, the ATV, would land on the people or kids, whatever, and cause serious injury and sometimes death. And so that was sort of the pathway to UTVs and side by sides. Not to mention the fact that side by sides just have a lot more utility. Usually there's cargo space, steering wheels. They're more comfortable to get in and out of. So UTVs have more or less replaced, I think, for the most part, ATVs and four wheelers. Um, and one of the probably the most significant aspects of a UTV, if it has a cage or rollover, like a roll bar or something, is it's designed to protect you and your passengers in the event that it does roll over. It keeps the vehicle from landing on top of you and your passengers. So that's why rollover units on tractors, UTVs, and even some four wheelers will have a roll bar over the top of them. But one of the things that people don't often remember, and I'm as guilty as anyone, is you don't put your seatbelt on. Um, I think, I think by definition and maybe by law, UTVs that have a rollover bar or a cab have to be equipped with seatbelts, and here's why. That rollover bar is designed to keep you and your passengers safe if the vehicle goes over, because it keeps you secured in the vehicle. It keeps you from being ejected, and it also keeps that vehicle from landing on top of you. And the only way to guarantee that that vehicle won't land on top of you is if you stay inside the vehicle. So the seatbelts are there to keep you and your passengers inside the UTV in the event that it does roll over or flip over, and then that roll cage protects you from being crushed by the vehicle if it goes over. The problem is that most people do not put their seatbelts on when they're in these vehicles, and so then you end up sort of with the worst of both worlds, because if it goes over, you're going to be ejected, and now this vehicle is heavier, much bigger than four wheelers, and more importantly, the roll cage or the cab suddenly becomes a very dangerous object. This is the safety device that can kill you if you don't have your seatbelts on. I had a case a few years ago, tragic case of a young boy. I think he was 7 or 8. was visiting his mom and stepdad on their farm, and they had some sort of a side by side UTV. I don't remember the brand. It's not really that important. But he was driving out, I don't know, to check on cows or something like that. And he was big for his age, but still not tall enough to reach the pedals and be seat belted. And so he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, and he was driving not super fast. Actually, kind of went up on an incline, slope of some sort, and it just kind of tipped over on its side. It wasn't like it was a rollover; it just flipped over on its side. But because he um, didn't have a seatbelt on, and in fact couldn't operate this thing with a seatbelt on, he unfortunately slid out, and the roll bar came and struck his head and his head was between the roll bar and the ground, and it killed him. So we had a wrongful death claim for that. And the argument that we had was this. I mean, all these vehicles have safety warnings, typically say don't operate if you're under 16, wear a helmet, all that kind of stuff, that I would say are routinely ignored by most people, even though they shouldn't be. But the seatbelt was something that would have prevented this and was designed to prevent this and is designed to work in conjunction with the roll bar so that these kinds of things don't happen. The roll bar is not a safety device if you're not secured inside the vehicle. And the only thing that secures you inside the vehicle is your seatbelt. So he didn't have a seatbelt on, and our argument was he shouldn't have been able to drive this vehicle because he literally could not operate it safely. He could not reach the pedals and be seat belted in at the same time, and therefore this accident should not have happened. And I always think about that because I have my own children, and I don't have a side by side. We have a four wheeler, and I'm very, very careful about how they drive it, and they drive like grandparents pretty much. But if you have a side by side, I just want to urge you: if you have a side by side that has seat belts, use those seat belts, especially for your kids. It's a pain, I get it. But those seatbelts are there for a reason. They're there to protect you from the safety device that's there to protect you from rollovers, the cage or the cab. So please, please, if you can, make those seatbelts work, adjust them, put your kids in it. Um, just be safe so that in the unlikely event that something like that does happen, it, at least you and your family will be saved from any serious harm and probably no harm at all. So I really want to remind people to be safe. And if your kids can't drive these things without having their seatbelt on, they probably shouldn't be driving them. And I would strongly encourage you to have that rule because um, it's not worth losing a child or a loved one to these things that are very avoidable. So anyway, wanted to do a quick video today. I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions about that, feel free to leave them in the comments afterwards. If you have a specific legal question, don't leave it in the comment. Just go to the description and send me a text message or email, and I'll be happy to respond to you that way. So anyway, appreciate you watching, and until next time, everyone, have a good one.